Christie's is delighted to be offering Francis Bacon's 1984 painting, 3 Studies for a Portrait of John Edwards, the artist's companion of the last 16 years of his life and probably one of the most important and significant relationships he'd ever had. Francis Bacon met John Edwards when Edwards was the manager of a bar in the East End of London. He got a message that Bacon and some of his friends wanted to come and visit, so in preparation and wanting to make a good impression, he purchased a large quantity of Bacon's favourite drink, champagne. Now, Bacon failed to arrive, and when the two finally met each other a couple of days later in the legendary Colony Room in London's Soho, Edwards gave Bacon a dressing down. This rather startled Bacon, who was used to being feted wherever he went. He was one of the most famous figures in the London social scene. And it intrigued him that this young man would come up and approach him this way. Edwards then relates the story about when he went round to Bacon's studio the next day, the artist had already started making a portrait of him. Over the next 16 years, Edwards and Bacon formed a very close friendship and companionship. And often Bacon would let him stay in the studio and watch him while he painted, which was a very rare honour. He didn't allow many people to watch him working. Bacon only painted 28 triptychs throughout his life, and this is one of the last 16 to remain in private hands. It's very different to the paintings that he painted earlier in his career, which were much more violent and aggressive. This is a much more peaceful and serene painting.
I've no idea why that triptych series. I think it is one image coming up against another. In these portraits of John, they are related because they are the same people. It may have something to do with having watched film. It may be something like that.
Edwards is sat on a single stool, looking very smart in his white shirt and grey flannel trousers. Here, Edwards is much more confident. He's sat there boldly with his leg pulled up across his knee. The way his face is depicted is very gentle. Bacon's obviously studying the features quite carefully here in the way he applies the paint to the canvas.
I think a painter, if he's going to attempt to record life, he's got to do it in a much, much more intense and curtailed way. It has to have the intensity of a very sophisticated simplicity.
Edwards is sat in each of these canvases, surrounded by one of the iconic cages that Bacon had been using really since the early 1950s, particularly with his Pope portraits. The cage was thought to be based on a sculpture by Giacometti that he saw in the 1930s.
We lived in a beautiful house. You've asked me sometimes why the back of my paintings are curved, and I think it is perhaps because the rooms at the back of the house were all curved.
I think by this stage in his life, Bacon was extremely confident in his abilities as an artist. And I think you can see the evidence of this in the way that he portrayed John Edwards across these 3 canvases.